come here despite the Mexico match. I promise if there is a store, I will let you know. I will just wait for a couple more minutes to see if there's others that come in and probably start at 6:05. Thank you.
Hands on. Or.
Yeah.
He's gonna turn it on. What's up? We'll come down, let you know.
So I just wanted to go ahead and know, for those of you who I have had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Ray Taylor, and I'm honored to serve as your supervisor here in third district. Thank you all for coming out tonight. So basically, what we're doing tonight here with the county's doing is we're asking for your input, how to deal with problems. And so, what's happening is that some of you may or may not know, the coast side has a development cap. And it's about 40 units, it's 40 units per year. And once there's a new fact I learned actually today, the first time I didn't know, that will be explained tonight. But the state HCD, the Housing and Community Development, has requirements that they have jurisdictions put into what's called their housing ordinance. And a jurisdiction, San Mateo County, like cities in this area, have to approve housing ordinance. If we don't, what ends up happening is that we are open to what's called the builder's remedy. What the builder's remedy allows a developer to do or someone to do is to ignore your planning restrictions and build the development as high and as small as it wants. And that, if you want to see an example of that, we can go to the city of Menlo Park. Where on the old Sunset campus, there is a skyscraper that has been proposed to be the highest, one of the highest buildings actually on the peninsula. There's examples of this that's happening right now in Woodside, which has recently come out. Where a developer has proposed to a site developer proposed a very large building there, taking advantage. The fact that housing element wasn't certified and was developed. So in San Mateo County, we had to get our housing element certified. And one of the requirements that HCD imposed on the county was that if we hit our development cap on the coast side of 40 units, what would happen is in applications, they would have to go ahead and apply to the coastal commission immediately for 50% increase in cap, raising it to 60 units. And so what's happening tonight is that in response to this issue that we have run up against, that we're running, we have this 40 unit cap, and we don't want to have to be sent to the coastal commission. We're trying to figure out a solution. So number one, we can go ahead and get people who are already in the pipeline through it. Number here tonight, they'll give you the numbers of how many people who have been in the pipeline up in this state and are waiting building permits. They've already spent a lot of money to go ahead and try to build that ADU for a family member, take care of someone in their family, produce something there to the property. And so there are a number of people, I think it's like 36, who are already have invested time and money and been through the process, and now they're being held up by the inability to get building permits. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with them. We're also trying to figure out how we go ahead and avoid getting this HCD imposed regulation. Do we have to go and ask for increase in our, increase that 40 units to 60, which would be a forever change. And so tonight, what initially happened in the process was that planning, came up with a plan, and they'll explain that to you tonight. They brought it to the planning commission, they brought it to the NCC, and it was met with pushback. And then I learned about it, and I said, wait a second, we're gonna start over from the beginning, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna tell the community the problem that we face. We're gonna go ahead and present the community with alternatives to look at. We're gonna take input from them to try to figure out how we can come to consensus around what solution best fits the coast side. And if we hear from you tonight that you don't wanna do anything, you wanna leave it the way it is and roll our dice, goes to the commission, we hear that from everybody, that's fine. If one of these other solutions, alternatives is something that you believe in, and you wanna support that, that's great. But tonight is our good faith, we're trying to do a good faith effort to meet with all of you and figure out how do we take care of members in our community who had, who are already in the process, and how do we also take one of the alternatives. We take all of the consensus that you guys came up with in the MCC, but kind of go to the San Mateo County Board, to the board I serve on, and the board has to vote what to do. So I have to get two others, but if we get consensus built around that, I'm confident the board will support whatever we come up with as a community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm Steve Mullins. I'm the Director of the Planning and Building Department, and thank you all for coming out tonight. I just have a couple things I want to start off with, then I'm gonna hand the mic over to Bharat Singh, our planning manager, who will go through the presentation. The first thing is, I understand an article came out today, COSI News reporting on the Midcoast Community Council meeting from last night. I understand it was AI generated and did not get the facts correct. It asserted that we were proposing to increase the cap to 75 units per year, and that is not the case, as you'll hear tonight. Another thing I just wanted to address up front is I heard a lot of theories about why the planning and building department is doing this, making this effort to address this issue of the cap. And I want to assure you that it's not in an effort to please some development company. We hear the stories of the people who have put in a lot of time and effort to get to the point where they want to build. These are your neighbors and your friends who want to add an ADU for family members, who want to realize their dream home that they've been working to build. And they're renting now in the community. So these are, like I said, we're trying to be responsive to the members of this community who have legitimate desires to improve their property. I think that's it. I have just and oh yeah, the third thing was I just wanted to apologize for getting ahead of the community in this regard. I honestly was surprised at the level of concern about the planning and building department's proposal. We thought it was a smart solution to the problem we're facing that would not result in a significant increase in development rates here. And clearly, there's a lot of concerns that have been expressed. So as the supervisor said, we're here tonight to start fresh, and we'll hear from you all about what your preferences are. So with that, turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. What I'd say, I'm the planning services manager at the planning department, and for today's meeting, hope my system works. So this is the agenda. I'll go through an introduction to the issue and the background of the issue. Once we're done with that, Camille, Leo, who is a current planner with the county, will explain the waitlist process which we have initiated. In order to make sure that people who are already in line or who want to get in line in terms of their permits at this point, there is a mechanism to do so. So she will go over those details, after which we'll discuss some of the LCP alternatives amendments that we would like you to vote on or consider. I just would like to say that the staff itself has sat down and gone through several permutations and combinations of what could be done. This is a synthesis of that because most of these were variants of the same. And we just sort of synthesized all of that to broadly 6 groupings. There might be a slight variation here and there based on what the community feedback is, but essentially we've looked at a whole bunch of those and we've just synthesized these 6 approaches. And then we'll have Q&A. So once I've presented everything, if you have questions or comments, we will go through that. I urge everybody to keep their comments and questions to one and comments brief, because there's a lot of people out here, and as I understand it, the building shuts at 8:00. I don't want to be here in the dark. And then after that, we will have a quick voting exercise, which you'll see a QR code online and a website. You all can use your phones, and if you're not keen about technology, there are some sheets that are pasted in the back. There are some dots in the back, which are all the different alternatives. If you have your handouts, they have all the alternatives in there, so you can read through that, and then you can take the red dot and put it on whatever you think makes sense to you. And what we will do is essentially take a snapshot, share that with the public at large.
My friend just texted me and said they can't see anything at home on Zoom. That the owl's not transmitting or something. Sorry.
Let me double check. Reese, can you see the beautiful image?
Yes, we currently have view of the presentation, but just not the camera of the room itself. If that was the concern.
So the presentation seems to be working on.
So she told me in the park when I was coming in the parking lot. But sorry.
No worries. So we'll have, everybody is open to vote online. You will see the instantly. If for some reason you can't get online, there's an alternative in the back. We will share all of that with the public once the meeting is done. We've summarized what we've heard today. And then the intention is to go back to the MCC with the recommendations from this group and what else we hear. If people send me emails, you'll see my email at the end. And we'll summarize all of that to the MCC so that everybody can make an informed decision. And then obviously, we will adjourn before we eat. So I just want to go over the background of the cap. The original LCP cap was 125 units. In the early 2000s, there was a boom in housing. There was a lot of issues with infrastructure, and the county understood that there was a lot of issues here, so they had recommended that we reduce it to 75. However, there was quite a bit of an opposition. Coastal Commission really didn't want any growth, so a compromise was meant to make it at 40 units to the 40 units per year, and it matches what Half Moon Bay had cost. I believe it's Measure B for them, which was a 1% cap, and the 40 units to the year is basically a numbered version of the 1% cap in terms of growth. Again, the key drivers for this reduction was traffic congestion on coastal routes, some of the wastewater failures that were there, some water supply constraints, and again, the intention was to align with the growth limits that were there in Half Moon Bay, so that it doesn't sort of you squeeze one place, you'll see the expansion in the other place. So the intention was to sort of keep both areas level. So what is the in terms of the LCP, policy 1.23, what it does is it says there is a 40-unit annual limit. It remains into effect till the county does three things. One, come up with a transportation management plan. It's outlined in LCP policy 2.53. The other one was to make improvements to stormwater and sewage facilities. And then lastly, we would have to go to the coastal commission with an amendment in order to increase the gap. So we cannot just increase the gap on our own. We have to go to the coastal commission and get that approval. So it'll be an amendment to the LCP, which meant going to the community, going to the planning commission, going to the board, and then going to the coastal commission. So in terms of why this was put in place, it was because the growth that people had seen between 2000 and 2010, and the concerns that were there. So the CAT came out in 2013, it was approved in 2012, but effectively came into being in 2013. Since 2013, population in the Midcoast has remained relatively flat. In fact, recently, in the last, since 2020, there has been a decline. In some places, it's about 12% decline. So with the 1% goal that was set, we had not really met that. Since 2013 till 2024, we never hit that 40-unit gap. We were doing probably on the best year was 34, 35 units. Otherwise, the average had been about 26, 27. In the last 5 years, the average has been about 30 permits being issued per year. So clearly the concerns that were there and the gap worked in terms of putting the brakes on development to the extent, partly because of housing costs and other things, we are seeing a decline in the population of the urban controls. And this is Montana, Ostrich, and Granada. All right, Mr. Denny. Much better. So what is the issue? We exceeded the limit in 2025 when Cypress Point's building permit was approved in December of 2025. What that did was 71 units and the other permits that were issued for that year brought the total for 2025 to 102, which is 62 more than what is allowed. As per the LCD limit, for affordable housing, there is an allowance where we can allow for that housing development to exceed, provided that year, the year that the building permit was issued for that affordable housing, and the 2 years following that year, the average across all 3 years is 40 units per year. So with that, at this point, we have only 18 permits that we can issue for 2026 and 2027. The department already has a significant amount of permits it's processing, building permits that it's processing. And it has stopped accepting new applications for building permits because we know we are going to run into this issue. And that is the reason why we are setting up wait listing process so that once people can go through that process, we have a proper list of who gets priority based on when their waitlist number was determined. So the resulting challenges because of that is we are likely to see a massive rush come January 1st, 2028, which will immediately have us hit the cap. And the other thing that is the most significant aspect of it is, as Supervisor Mueller had mentioned, the state insisted that we add a policy in our housing element that said, if we hit the cap, the very next year we have to go to the coastal commission with an amendment to increase the cap by 50%. So we anticipate that we will hit the cap in 2026. That means we would have to go to the coastal commission with a proposal to amend the CP cap at least 50%. So that would take it from 40 to 60. If there's a comment, and I can ask people to wait till the question and answers session. So what is housing 11.6? This is what it says in the text. It says essentially if the 40-unit limit on the annual permit issuance poses a constraint to development during the housing element period, which is from 2022 to 2031, amend the limit to allow additional permit issuance. And what that means is if the limit is reached in any year of the period, the draft amendments to raise the limit at least by 50% for local adoption and resolution of the California Coastal Commission has to be done within 1 year. So we are going to hit the limit this year. And we will, if we do, we have to go as per this policy to the Coastal Commission with an amendment to raise the limit. So what does this issue mean in terms of Cypress Point being approved? So as you see here, the big bar that you see in this graph is the 2025 where we had 102 units approved. It is all that extra above 40 is what we have to accommodate across the next 6 years. So for this year, we can issue 18. That remains, about 36 that we cannot issue if we are doing 30 units a year on average. And then all of that stuff that we don't accept will pile on 2028. So we have about 42 units that we technically will not approve for 2026 and 2027, which will pile on 2028. So that we hit the gap then, and then that cascade into the next year, so it'll take us the good part of 4 years to actually hit the gap every year till we get to what is the sort of normal trend in 30 permits per year. And this is what is of great concern to us, not just because we have to go to the Coastal Commission with a request to increase the gap, but this is going to be a huge burden on the community. People who want to build their ADUs, who want to build their homes. This is going to cause unnecessary delay in that, and particularly those who have already invested in a planning permit, those who are in the building permit process, that will delay them. People who have made plans that, in 2028 or 2029, I'll have this ready so that people can move, all of that stuff will be upended. And that's one of the main concerns for us to try and see, can we figure out a way to get out of this so that we don't hit the gap and we allow for the regular permits to be issued as we've been doing. So on average, 30 years per year. So with that, I'm going to move to the wait list, and I'll ask Daniel to just explain this. So it's a bit of a break. We'll go through the wait listing process. And if you have questions about this, Daniel will be here after the meeting, and she can help you answer some of those. So I'm going to hand it over to take over.
Hi, everyone. So the moratorium on building permits for new dwelling units does not affect PLN cases, planning permits. So it should not affect if you want to apply for a design review permit or your CDP for a new house. Go ahead and still get those in. As for ADUs and JADUs, they typically don't require a design review permit or planning permit. They go straight to building. So we are proposing, or we encourage those who are planning ADUs or JADUs to get a formal CDX application into the county as a way of queuing, as a way for the county knowing, telling the county that you want to do an ADU or JADU in the future, and we'll take your CDX approval date. And it'll be like first come, first serve on the CDX approval date for your ADU or JADU.
Still online.
Yes.
Yeah, the form's online. So for new ADUs and JADUs, we encourage we'll take a brief look at your ADU and your JADU application, make sure it complies with the ordinance. We will need a CDX form, a planning application form, which is the owner's approval signature. We're collecting on that, and some plans. They can be somewhat conceptual. They don't have to be as detailed as you would submit for a building permit. Okay, as for the wait list, once the permit cap is lifted, we're gonna start, taking in building permit applications again. And we're gonna prioritize that based on, your permit ready date, basically. So all your review agencies have to sign off, including water and sewer. And once it's ready to go, we'll say we'll have a bunch of projects that are ready to go. The way that we're going to prioritize those is, we're gonna put canceled building permit applications first, but you have to get those ready and get those going. The next is the PLN cases, either for a house or for an ADU. We'll take either the design review approval date or your formal CDX approval date. And it'll order where you are in the queue based on that approval date. So if you have something you wanna do, come and get those CDX applications in and your PLN applications in. And then, of course, there's just normal building permits that will probably flood in when the cap is lifted. So, that's our proposed system of queue.
Thank you, Camille. And as I mentioned, if you have further questions about this, after the meeting, you can speak with Camille. And we will try and provide more information should we not have an amendment in place. So this is what is the backup at this point. So just pivoting back to the alternatives. So we have two alternatives. One is in the LCP, is basically states that do a transportation management plan, improve the wastewater and stormwater systems, and then apply as an amendment. That is something not in consideration, as Steve mentioned. It's just too much time and effort, and it will not meet what we need to do at the end of 2026, and that will automatically trigger us going to the coastal commission with an increase in gas. So it just doesn't make any sense. So what is left is essentially amending the policy 1.23D, which is how we average out a affordable housing project across a given number of years. And what I have is a list of approaches in terms of how we average that. And what we'd like you to do is to have your questions ready to clarify any questions you have on any of those alternatives at the end of the presentation. Hopefully, I'll do justice in explaining all of those. And then once we've done that, we'll do the voting as to which one you would prefer. And again, hopefully, I can explain all of these things. It's a bit technical, but I'm going to do my level best to try and simplify the approaches. So with that, the first approach, so these are the 6. So obviously, the first is no change. The second one was essentially exempting affordable housing from the gap, but again, not pursued because that's just a lot of work and complicated, so to say. It won't really be able to, we won't be able to do it in the given time that we have. Then we have option C, which is a looking forward average. So right now we are looking forward in our averages, but what we're suggesting is we amend it that anytime we have a situation where we have to average forward and we cannot issue more than 20 permits in the next 2 years, it automatically triggers an increase for those 2 years of 20 permits per year. So for those 2 years, the gap is actually 60 rather than 40. So what we do with that is we get, we have some level of reducing the overflow effect, so that it's manageable relatively. Then the next one is a similar version of raising it to half the limit, but it's a more tiered approach, and I'll go over that when we speak to them individually. And then there are 2 that are looking backward. One is basically banking on the unrealized permits that we've had, and that's the thing that we took. That's the alternative that we took to the planning commission. We spoke to the coastal commission about it, and they are generally fine with that. And then the last one is that the variant of that, instead of looking all the way back to 2013, it is a moving looking back of 10 years. So I'll go through each one of these, as we move forward. So first of all, no change, essentially, in terms of, effort for our end, we'll have to work on the wait list, we'll have to, figure all of that out. We don't have to really do any amendments, but the big challenge over here essentially is there'll be a cascading effect, all sorts of issues, what we're trying to avoid, but if the community thinks that that's the price to pay, then that's the price to pay. But the big, issue here is we would have to go to the postal commission with an amendment, that increases it by 50%. And again, it's open to the public. If the public supports no change and they make their case, at the coastal commission, at the planning commission, at the board, so we may run the risk of having our, housing element decertified, which again causes a whole bunch of other problems, but it is what it is. So the next option that I mentioned was that should this averaging out because of an affordable housing project result in we cannot issue more than 20 permits, for the next 2 years, an automatic trigger allows us to issue 20 permits per year. And what that does is essentially allows us to reduce this, backlog by half in that sense. So earlier you saw if you did nothing, this would, continue for at least 4 years. This way it will likely continue for the following 2 years, so 28, 29, and then we can get back to normal. But this still runs the same issue. If we hit the cap, we have to go to the coastal commission, so we have to do that anyways in, this scenario as well.
But the key is it's time.
Yes, it's time limited. It's only for 2 years. After that comes back to normal, but the bottom line is we have to then go back to the coastal commission, ask for an actual permanent, update to 60, which again, we are not in favor of doing at this point.
But you hit it already this year, right?
Pardon?
You hit it into 20.
Yeah, so I got the question. So we were allowed to go over the cap for Cypress Point, right? That's already allowed by the policy. And then we haven't hit the cap this year,
Oh,
okay?
it went to 18, not
Yeah,
20. Okay.
That's right.
I thought we were holding questions.
Yeah, I mean,
I just got confused.
Thank you.
The math confused me. Okay.
So, so these were the two looking forward. So this was the first looking forward option. The second looking forward option is more of a tiered approach. So it is the same idea that you allow for up to half worth of the cap, but it's a more of a tiered approach, so that if you were above, 10 units above the cap, you get, 35 above, what the cap is, and it reduces as you increase. So effectively, you cannot have more than, 160, permits issued over the path in the next, over the 3 years. So, it's pretty much the same limit as the first one, but this is more of a tiered approach rather than a sort of switch. The first one was, if you can't issue more than 20, it gets triggered. This is much more of a gradation, where if you are slightly above, you get more, and as you exceed the limits, your ability to issue more permits gets reduced, in order to make sure that we are still within the 20 per, exceeding only 20 per year for the next 2 years. And this is sort of a comparison here. So let me just point out, so this is the tier, and this is the sort of trigger one, where if you can't issue more than 20. So what you can see here is that if you're over 20 or 10 to 20, you get 35 allowed per year. But in this one, you don't get anything. So it's more of a gradual thing till you get to, if you're 80 over the cap, you only get 20, and that's the same thing here. So this only gets triggered if we hit this. Otherwise, we have to deal with the cap, and there might be some reduction in terms of the amount of permits that we can issue. In both these cases, we will hit the limit, most likely, and we would have to go to the, coastal commission with an amendment. So that's the reason why I think that we were looking forward to increasing the cap short of a full 40. will result in us having to go to the coastal commission. So with these, looking forward, the next one, we're looking backward. So as I mentioned earlier on, when the cap was set at 40, it was based off of 1% growth. We have never hit 40 till 2025. So there is a huge set of unrealized permits that were never utilized. And we thought that, if the goal was to not exceed 1% growth per year, if you look back and, accounted for that in terms of, you've got 71 over with Cypress Point, you average out the 71 across the years of 2013, you still have, you can absorb all of that, and you still have some to spare for a possible future affordable housing project that might happen 6-7 years down the line in that sense. This approach doesn't have any impact on the cap, so we can just do what we're doing, issuing an average 30 permits a year, and we don't really have to go to the coastal commission for increasing the limit. What we have to go for to the coastal commission for is making this minor amendment, which they have already looked at and are in agreement in principle of what this approach is. One thing that I'd like to mention here is what this does is it tells us exactly how many units on any given year, how many actual units, affordable housing units we can really do without really hitting the cap. So we know exactly how many units can be built on any given year. So this is an advantage to this, that there is a known number. But if you're looking forward, there is none of that. It can be whatever it is, and then it'll just trickle down forward. And so this is something that at least gives us some level of certainty that we know what the number is. So the next version is same thing, but instead of looking all the way to 23, it's a rolling look back of 10 years. So what this does is it'll exclude 2013, 2014, and 2015. Those would not be banked, but you're looking all the way back to 2016, and trying to average out 40 over those years, for those 10 years. And that too will do the same thing. It'll free up 2026 and 2027 for the up to 40 unit limit. And theoretically, we'll get that average of 30 units being issued over the next 2 years without any problems. Again, no need to go. The housing element policy isn't triggered. All we have to do is make this amendment, and the coastal commission, again, in principle, agrees with this approach. So this version should also not be an issue for them to approve. I know this has been a lot of numbers and backs and forths. This is what we had recommended. It's a lot of text, but essentially this is the version E that we had. This is what was taken to the planning commission. But again, this is up for consideration. So quite technical in terms of numbers. I'm open to questions and answers. So I appreciate Dave, you had the point. So if you could just walk around and pick everybody who had raised their hands. And again, I would request you to keep it brief.
And let me say, before we start, of course, we want to give everybody a chance to actually ask some questions. So questions, not comments. We're not asking anyone to say how they're going to vote or what they think of any of the plans. Just questions for clarifying your plans. Okay. You can allow the Zoom question also.
Yes.
Yes. Why was 2013 chosen as the cutoff date looking backward?
Because 2012 was the year that they put in the 40.
I'm just curious regarding the LCP and the general plan. Is there a maximum total cap? I'm not talking about per year, though. Like as far as in general, is there a maximum cap?
There's no maximum cap. It is essentially a 1% growth rate that we have to not exceed, which is the 40 units per year.
So my question is
Why does the county get to bank, go back and take these permits if other people can't? Like, why does the county just come in and just get to do what they want? Is this, my second part of the question is this temporary, like, income taxes that were supposed to be temporary and will get pushed out later on or enforced, at a different date? Or they just say, well, we just want to keep going, because this is what we want to do.
This is the cap was an imposition from the coastal commission. The county wanted 75, but it was pushed back, and that's why it came down to 40. We are, Dave, the person that started hitting behind us. So essentially, the cap was imposed, the county wanted 75, but we had to sort of come to an agreement to 40. There is a policy in place in order to allow for affordable housing, and that has been triggered. Since then, rules have changed, the state has come up with different rules. And that's what we are trying to address, so,
To answer your question, no, because what will happen is whatever everyone decides on has to go to the coastal commission as an amendment, and it will be locked as the amendment that we had. So if we go ahead, if you bank it back 4 years, and when you bank back the 40 over that time period, that will be what the amendment that the coastal commission approved. So it will be locked. It's not like the county's gonna be able to say, well, we're gonna extend it, because we have to go to the coastal commission to get that approved. Thank you.
I have 3 questions. What is the real number of allotments over the 13 years that have not been used? That's question number 1.
about 166.
Okay. You can obviously roll those forward. I believe that's what the coastal commission would like to do, from my understanding.
They don't, it's not rolling it forward, it's basically if there's an affordable housing project that exceeds the cap. The idea is to then use that 166 units to sort of average out the 40.
Okay, next question. Why is affordable housing taking a chunk of these allotments when this is something that the community needs? And they're taking away from all the local builders and people that have their dream to want to build their house, they don't want to live in a cave. And they want to move forward. I know people in this room that had their permits yanked from it because they didn't get things done in a certain amount of time.
But this was a policy that was put in place in 2013. We never had to face this issue till 2025. Now that we have, we are trying to resolve.
Okay, ADUs, I'm concerned about that. That's a state mandated thing. Why are those part of the allotment? And if they are, should they count as a full allotment, the 1 out of the 40, or should they be a percentage of that, like 30%, since they're only 800 square feet?
So as the amendment was written and accepted, it said full ADUs have to be counted unless they are deemed affordable. So we are responding to what's in the text of the policy and trying to figure out a way out of that.
But they're much less than a single.
I agree with you, but at the time of the inception of the policy, that's what was approved.
Okay, last one. How did the county and planning and building department not see this coming and issue these 71 permits for an affordable housing complex when all these other builders and everybody else out there has a home in mind and they get aced out?
The process is very long. The building permit issued for the affordable housing was in December of 2025, at the very end. It had it been in the beginning, yes, we would have seen it and we would have tried to figure out something. So that's why we are in this situation.
Hi, Kevin, I'm curious to know if in this process you're prioritizing actual community members who are trying to build a house that they want to live in versus developers who maybe are submitting 2, 3, 4 permits at a time, or if that's even possible for them to do. Also, I think that the quantifiable look at affordable housing being the same as residential housing or housing as the same should be reviewed and looked at. Also, I just want to state that I would like to see community members and those who have permits and want to build their forever homes and prioritized.
Well, the way this process is trying to do that, so those who are already in queue, they have priority. Again, it's, if you look at the permits, there's no way to tell if it's somebody who is a developer, because the application is based on individual parcels. There are no multi-families in the queue at this point. So that's something that we are trying to prioritize, that if it's ADUs, if it's single family homes, that's what we're trying to prioritize with the way this process. What was the second question I got?
So I think the way that you quantify affordable housing, and you said that there was the potential of looking at it as something separate, as not taking up all of those spaces as a residential unit would, and figuring out new map.
So that, in 2030, the way that the rule was written, it said affordable housing would have to be part of the averaging. The leeway was you can average over 3 years rather than just one. So that was part of the rule, which has resulted in this issue. There is an option B that I mentioned, which is you can exempt 100% affordable housing from the cap altogether. However, getting to that is a big task, and if we don't really do it by the end of this year, we are automatically triggered to then raise the cap. So that's the reason why we're not pursuing that as an idea, but yes, that is an option.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I'm a little concerned, I know the permits, 71 units were issued in the December 25. Well, there was a lot of people that were at the goal line, just sort of waiting, winter moratorium coming in, that paid their impact fees to the school district, paid their sewer fees, their Granada sanitary, just all was left possibly, erosion control, straw wattles, a construction entrance. Now, where do we stand there when we're literally at the goal line? Are we going, how are we going to prioritize these people? There must be 14 or 15 applicants that are right there, that are ready to build. What's gonna happen to those people that paid all the plan checking fees, paid the school taxes? What's gonna happen? How are we gonna determine that?
So as I mentioned, we have about 18 permits that we can issue, and based on your approval dates, you get, those 18. What we are trying to do is resolve that, like the wait list is one of the options, and the amendment is the other one, once you get the amendment, it's open, and then we can, go there many ways, making their homes and building their houses, if we get the amendment.
Hi, thanks so much for coming.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks so much for coming tonight and walking us through this, really appreciate that. So 2 questions, one, can you please define for all of us what exactly affordable housing criteria is? And 2, with the rollback, looking backwards, would a 5-year roll, look back have met the criteria for you to hit the 30-year cap, or is it you had to go 10 years?
So affordable housing is needed affordable housing, that particular unit will be sold below market rate. Again, there's different scales to it, but essentially it is needed to be sold below market or rented below market. So it has to be part of the deed. So that's technically what the affordable housing that this is referencing. With the other question that you had in terms of, sorry.
5 years.
5 years. So we've looked at that, and the point is, why 5, why 6, why 7? What is the basis of that? So the most logical basis, if you're looking back, is and trying to see where you haven't used resources, then you should go all the way back. So that was one option from a logical standpoint. Why not 5, 6, this and that? Keeping that. The other one, the 10 years, census happens every 10 years. Your growth rate is consistent every 10 years. So that's the reason why we picked those and not 5, 6, 7. We could have said, okay, where do we get to that 71 and we're clear, which is about 6 years, and we can say that, but that's just solving for this. What if something else happens and we don't really issue and then question that, so why this? So that's the reason why we have 2030 and 10 years. Can I ask folks to pause their 2 hands up in on Zoom? I'd like to give those folks a chance. Please, if you can allow Dolores to speak, please.
Hello. Actually, my question is a little different. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so The reason that there was a limit is that we wanted to ensure that the roads, utilities, schools, and public works facilities were not overburdened. So what are you doing about not overburdening? Because that's really the big concern here on the coast. We've had sewer overflows and traffic is a problem, and there's no emergency evacuation plan. So it's fine to be accommodating building, okay. But what about this other stuff? There's been no talk about it, and we're all here worried about what you're gonna do if there is ever an emergency, and traffic is already a mess. You haven't addressed why it makes sense to add units or to not add units. I mean, what is the status of our infrastructure? Because my understanding, I looked at the Connect the Coast studies, and I've been very concerned about all the overflows we've had and how the SAM almost was a disaster a couple of years ago when we had that big storm. So what are we doing about that? And I do want to correct one thing. You stated that when we were looking at the Cypress Point 71 units, um, at the same time you were doing Connect the Coast side, and then decided that, oh no, you weren't going to need an increase in units, so you didn't bother finishing it to the degree that the LCP required. And, I just want to remind you that we did know this was going to come up. We knew this 10 years ago, but it still went through. So again, my questions really are about the infrastructure. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and answer the question on the infrastructure. So on the issue with respect to wildfire evacuation, we are pretty limited, obviously, by the transportation infrastructure because we are looking right now, as Mr. Colorado, I'm going to tell you all, as a site that we can actually bring people to the shelter in place. So we're looking now to fill the shelter in place site, so because after these couple tsunami events, we realized how clogged these rivers get. So we are actively looking at sites to create a shelter in place location. The point I want to make to everybody, because I've heard this around this issue, is, well, we don't have the infrastructure to go, to do this. And what's really interesting about that is, when we went back and I actually was talking to staff today about this, the reason why there was a 1% growth cap, the 40 units and not more, is because of the infrastructure. If we actually went and improved all of that infrastructure on the coast that people are talking about, we would get hit with a higher growth cap. I want people to understand that. So it's actually, for those of you who don't want growth and you're complaining about the infrastructure is actually protecting you from growth. Because what would happen is if we actually had improved it, the state would be saying we need to do 75 or 90 or more. And so that was something very interesting to me that I understand as a result of this, is that the 1%, the 40 units is actually a result of the fact that their infrastructure isn't in place. And so, for those who are saying you need to improve the infrastructure first, you just want you to know you might get what you're not wishing for. With perspective.
Thank you. There's one more person on Zoom, Anne Rothman. Please could you have her in the.
Thank you. I have a similar question about the infrastructure, but more importantly, there's a new study that came out from UC Santa Barbara, and it talks about wildfire risk and how deadly it is if you don't have at least 6 routes out. Well, we have one. We have Highway 1, and then we have to either make our way to 92 or try to get over Highway 1 over going into Pacifica, but the problem there is that you have eucalyptus trees that meet you on the other side of the tunnel. And if there's a massive wildfire, you're not going to survive. And having a place for everybody to congregate means, well, you're all just going to get incinerated in the same place. I mean, I'm not sure. I understand what you're saying. You're saying, well, if you have infrastructure, then, they're built. But I mean, you have to look at wildfire risk. and the fact that first responders can't get to you if you don't have roadways. And so I think that there should be more planning put in place. And
Excuse
so,
me, I think your time is up. I just addressed the issue of the emergency evacuation as such, as a concern. Essentially, yes, there are challenges, we are aware of that. The Department of Emergency Management has been working on trying to find out, solutions as Supervisor, mentioned that, if there aren't ways out, we would have to look at areas where, people can gather. So those are the options that we're looking at. Again, this is not the main issue here. The main issue is if we don't do anything, we have to increase the gap. We have to go to the coastal commission to increase the gap. And, that basically throws out any argument in terms of, in trying to protect the growth rate or exceed the gap or limit the gap and all of that stuff. That just goes away. So yes, it's an issue. We are dealing with it. We are trying to work with it. The safety element has just been released. There's a bunch of policy that they're trying to address this, and hopefully that will push things forward. But at this point, that isn't really something that we can really do anything about.
My name is Tim Pond. On the night or the days that these were canceled, I was just wondering, has anybody thought of continuing processing the building permits rather than just yanking these away? Why not continue to process these permits that are out there? Because I used to receive these letters that would say, you have a permit that's gonna expire if you don't do something with this permit. And I got a lot of these letters, and then all of a sudden, there were no letters. There was just complete cancellation of a lot of permits with no warning, and people were left in the lurch. And it was cruel. This was cruel. This was a mean-spirited, whether it was intended to or not, that's what happened. Why not let those permits continue to be processed, and then the building permits won't be issued because the cap would be too high, but then they would be ready to be issued at least. It seemed unfair, and I'm just wondering if there's discussion with that.
There is a regulation that says if there's inactivity of a certain permit,
Oh, I know.
it's automatically, and so
No.
we have.
I've discussed this issue with Mr. Monowitz, and we are gonna be bringing all of those back to life once we go ahead and get this. So we hear you, we understand that issue, we will be addressing it. We have to figure out what our plan is, but we will be notifying all those who have been canceled that we're gonna be trying to bring those back to life, okay? That's one of the reasons why we're here tonight, because people who had that happen to them have spent a lot of time, a lot of money. We're trying to take care of residents on the coast. We're trying to figure out how to come together as a community and never figure out a solution. So what you're talking about is addressed.
The lady in the back, please, if it's possible. Sorry,
I'm having input that I want the feedback.
Yeah, Dave Wilson, HB on the MCC. Given that this issue has been known about since 2017, Steve Monowitz was very well aware that the previous supervisor was. Why was the housing element allowed to put in that cap without having this plan in place? At the point they prepared that go back for extra units, we knew that was gonna happen. We didn't know the exact date, but we knew it was going to happen. And the other thing is it possible to go back and negotiate that further? And finally, I don't think you have enough backup units to carry you forward to not hit the housing element requirement in any case sometime in the next 8 or 9 years, especially if some of those apartments. But people may not realize that every single apartment counts as a unit. 10-unit apartment building is 10 permits under this average.
So thanks for your comments, Dave. The Midcoast Cypress Point project was in process for many, many years, and it started with the plan and permit. It required local coastal program amendment to be approved by the coastal commission. We didn't know that local coastal program amendment would be approved. And then had to get coastal development permit authorization, right, which was subject to appeals. We didn't know if that the permits would be altered under appeals. then they had to get their building permit issued. When it was going to be issued was hard to know. It occurred at the end of December, so to those of you who should have saw this coming and acted sooner, I will accept responsibility for that. It was not intentional. I wish we worked further ahead in dealing with this. With regard to the housing element policy, the state has cracked down on all jurisdictions that have quotas. So they have required that we put this in there. This effort that we're working on right now is an effort to avoid having to propose an increase to 60. If we can find a solution so that we don't run up against and establish a moratorium this year, we can avoid having to pursue that LCP amendment under the housing element.
But what about over the next 7, 8, 9 years, particularly if somebody puts in another work housing? Then there is a problem.
So I heard this, I echoed this sentiment echoed several times now, and I'm curious about,
It's already for.
what I'm curious about is the affordable housing components. Can't that be pulled out? It's in one option for us to consider reassessing what the value of affordable housing has juxtaposed against residential housing permits. But I wonder if it can't be something that's pulled out as an option on other available options to us to look at in consideration that it's not taking up as much space than it could be more residential permits issue.
So that issue is basically the language of the policy. The exception is because of affordable housing. And if you want to change it, or accept it, that's option B. But as I mentioned, if we go that route, we are still going to take a lot more time than on some of these other options, and we'll still get to the point where we have to go to the postal commission. So yes, it's an option. If the committee wants it, that's what we'll do. But it is going to take longer than what we anticipate. And again, you have to, the idea here is, yes, that is something that is a good idea, but we just don't have time to really get behind it and get it done before we run into this problem.
So what I would say to you all is this one, I actually agree with them on pulling that off as an option. The reason why is if you take affordable housing out and you don't count it, then as much affordable housing as anyone would want to be built on the coast and not have it be counted could take place. And so personally, as your supervisor, I want it accounted for in the growth rate.
Out of the 40 units.
Yes.
Can we go to that lady, please? In fact, she's been raising her hand for some time.
Good evening, I'm at 60.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
How you doing? Good evening. I've lived here on the coast my entire life. I'm gonna ask the question personally for myself, 2 questions. I submitted everything that the county had requested. I was already in the building stage. When my question is attached to the gentleman in the front, what's gonna happen to my permit? Do I start all over again? Or will I be jumping in where I left off?
You'll be jumping in where you left off.
Because there were some regulations, that's one of the questions that I was concerned, and also the fees, obviously are gonna be still, and we're staying there, whatever I have paid, correct? It's not gonna be a change, and my stove is still gonna be gas range, correct? But it's one of my concerns, because I kept getting hit with it on 2023, 2017, blah, blah, blah. So I just wanna make sure that I stand where I was left off.
Yes, that's correct, and you'll be vested into the code cycle of when you submit it, so, any future changes to the building regulations wouldn't affect your project.
It's not.
Thank you.
Hi, Bill. Couple questions, we didn't cover this at the last meeting commissioning, I'm aware of that. You talked about, and correct me if I misunderstood, you said we'd stop issuing permits in 2026.
Once we hit the 18, then.
Right, so, right. And then, but you're encouraging permit applications, which, so it sounds like we can control the amount of permits. But then we can't control how many are coming in, right?
So there's another law that isn't, trying to stand in the works, so to say, which is permit streamlining act. And if we accept a permit, we are obligated to complete it in a certain amount of time. And that's the reason why we have stopped accepting permits at this point, because we.
Yeah, and so there's a distinction between planning permits and building permits, right? So the process is, you first need to secure your planning approval. And we're not saying no to those planning approvals. In fact, that's what we're encouraging, because if you complete your planning process, then you can be placed on the wait list. But we can't accept new building permits until we see an opening in this cap.
That was what I was. Also, on the last two alternatives about the banking of permits, I didn't see any numbers for how many total units would be allowed under that we discussed that number in the meeting, but I didn't see it here.
So if you look back to 2013.
That's like that,
Sure.
appreciate it.
So in 2013, for the planning commission meeting, we have calculated that if you look back to 2013, we have about 166 unrealized permits, and that would be your number that is basically what is allowed before you exceed 40 units to the acre for the entire history of the gap. If you look 10 years back, I think you will lose probably 60 to 70. I don't know off the top of my head, but we remaining about 100, and off that, 71 will be taken by Cypress Wood.
Right, but we were talking about a firm that it was 182 units, if I recall.
Yes, but we have issued the permits.
So at the end of 2027, I guess it is, we possibly have 182 potential, not that they would be issued, but potentially 182 units.
So the way the banking system would work, if you will, is it would take care of the 71 over that we issued for Cypress Point.
Right.
But we would continue to limit the annual permits to 40 per year.
Right.
Until you get that cap, and then that's the. Thank you for coming here and giving us the opportunity to have these report back to the guys for the presentation. I appreciate it. Just to clarify, and a couple of things, so a building permit for whether it may be a 500 square feet or a multi-family or long-term housing that might be 71 units, each one of those is considered a permit.
Yes.
Right, and so for the ones that are overage and for like AU, is there a reason we can't use some of the ones that we have used in the past? Pull them forward for those, as we can't bank in the past. Maybe for the smaller ones like that, they're they're being rated value just as much as the. That's for the home on a lot.
The way that the policy is written, it doesn't allow us to use half or a third of look back as such. We're recommending a look back approach rather than a look forward. But we are trying to keep it as simple as possible. If we get into more complexities, that takes more time to sort of analyze and vet out and figure out what does that mean. Because if you're saying it's half or a third, there are humans living in there, and maybe it's a different way that you have to count that. So it depends on a young person, a family, all of that. So there's just much more work to do emergency that, so we're trying to keep it simple.
And, just in terms of trying to provide the ability for applicants who want to build an ADU now, this idea of looking back and asking to roll forward some of those unused credits that's one of the alternatives that are before you. So that's something that we are proposing that, the county consider.
As an initial in 2013, when they made the plan of 1% growth, right? That plan was made without knowing the state was gonna mandate the 80 years, mandate the low income housing. So that's taking precedence over your 1% growth there. And if they're piling on and put a burden on us for that, well, we could go, and the question is to follow up on your end. Does it include permits for expansion of the house?
No, you can, permits to improve an existing residence are continue to be processed.
Even if it expands a little bit,
Yes, you can increase your, you just can't add a new unit like the ADU or a junior ADU, but you can definitely do an addition.
has the state said anything about their mandate, it could affect, everything else, could make all county lawsuits?
Not more than what we've presented today.
So the only thing I said, the only thing I would say, guys, is that we are, every year, we are looking at state legislation, regarding the immigration. Every year I've been a supervisor for the last 4 years, there's been state legislation to increase density in coastal zone. So I want to, if you care about that issue, stay engaged on the issue, because there have been times I've had to do op-eds with everybody saying to Mr. Winger, hey, wait a second, we don't have the resources for that.
So as a lifetime co-sec resident, I can speak for most of the people I know. None of us wanted a low-income housing project, particularly right down the street. So to have that consequence followed by the burden of suffrage for all of us in the industry, because that's what's gonna happen on the coast. Anybody who's against us building a house on a lot we just bought, or building a house on a lot that we bought owned for 10 years and paying taxes on, or building an in-law unit for my mom or your mom is the solution to, follow up as the continued axe grinding for Cypress Coast, you're wrong. There'd be huge consequences. And my question really relevant to the paying, taking the banked credits from when the policy was put in place. I think that's probably the fairest thing, but if we use 71 of those, say hypothetically, in 2025, the balance of those credits, I want to make sure that those go to the right place and not just on the next big 5 7 years down the road, low income housing project, right? I want to make sure that those get used by the community. I want insurance to say that only so many of those over the next, forever. If those credits, if you said something a minute ago, it sounded like that was a fixed short term, we would apply those credits to whatever we might use for 2025 or 2026. Or would those 160 some go forward until they were either used, or would they die at some aging point?
So the two variations that you have, 2023, 2013, looking back to 2013 and 10 years. The 10 years one is where previous ones.
I got that.
Yeah, they die. The other question you had is.
They die when?
Basically, as you move, the 2013 one.
For the 13 years?
So let me just explain. So 2013, essentially, it's looking back till 2013. That option, you're counting all the way back to 2013. So unless we hit the limits, that's going to grow. The 10-year one is just moving forward. And the trend has been that we are getting more and more applications per year. So eventually that bank is going to start to shrink in the future, to the point where it may be zero, and I don't know when that'll happen.
So let me just explain. You take this car and you drop it and it fills in all these spaces, and then you just go back to business as normal. That's what they're proposing. Take this per bar, you drop it, fills in all these places, and you go to business as normal on the coast. And business as normal on the coast for all of these years was less than 40 units per year. And the reason why that is because it's really hard, as you all know.
I understand that, I'm just wondering, are they gonna age the house?
No, because they won't age out, because what will happen is these will all drop down. And then it's just like, we're just back to business as normal the way it was. So they don't age out, we're just.
So we're here again, that's something that already.
And let's, look, what you're asking for is for us to make a commitment that the county will never do another affordable housing project on the coast over this amount. And it's not legal, I can't make that commitment. I just can't, I don't have the power to make that commitment.
This gentleman, that's the back. But, let me get this down, I don't understand it.
Are there any more on?
Let's get the people that
On one side, Don, so as I'm reviewing the different alternatives to this process. I look down, I see something red down here about the bottom, little guy, we've already mentioned a number of times. And I wonder if you can clarify this for me, probably a bit more global perspective. Which includes like anything else you can like. It says, it's in red, so it must be. It says state may force an increase in capital residential housing element, and some numbers after that. Could you describe to me the geographic location and the housing element name for the one you're worried about? What is this geographic location for this particular housing element? Because I know cities have them, Half Moon Bay has one, Hillsborough has one. Is ours a county-wide, or is it a mid-coast? And if so, housing in those other places, maybe Pescadero, maybe Lahana, something like that. Why don't you do that? So I'm ready to know the geographic location of the housing element you're describing.
So the housing element covers unincorporated San Diego County. All of it. And,
right?
So in unincorporated San Mateo County, if you go and look at unincorporated Daly City, county is still the largest unaffordable housing development you've ever seen. Like, the problem is unincorporated San Mateo County is a bunch of different areas of the county. And what happened was the housing, HCD, the state said there has to be a certain number of units portion to the coast side. We have a whole different plan that actually goes down to Pescadero. So the state, because of equity purposes, demanded a certain amount of units go in each place. But we still have in place the LCP, which has a 40 unit cap, which is what we're talking about tonight. Is how do we go ahead, take this into account if people get their permits and protect the 40 unit cap, which everybody voted for to begin. So we are trying to protect the values that you all put in place in 2013, while we're dealing with the HCD imposed mandates and to deal with this point in time.
I'd like clarification on a couple of things. First is this concern about the state forcing us then to apply for an increase of 50% on the cap. Would that, if it goes through, be permanent? And yes, the second thing is, I've heard various discussions about what's gonna happen with these bank unused permits. Is that a part of these proposals about precisely how they'll be available for use? People talk about.
they will be available to use for affordable housing projects.
For affordable. That's what I thought you said.
If we exceed the 40 unit cap.
Right, so the plan, if that goes into effect, is to, as shown on this diagram over here, to try and keep things at 40, which has never been a problem, until unusual events like these affordable housing permits come through. And then there would be a bank of backfilled unused permits that could then be applied to that, so it doesn't affect our future.
If this drops in.
Yes,
If
that
this
is
drops
exactly.
in.
So if you look at the light blue, that's here, that's taking that excess and just dropping it all the way back.
Right, but so the plan is if this gets approved by the coastal commission, that's the plan to avoid kicking in those requirements to bump up.
Yes.
So that it's in the future, without any choice at all.
But that's why one of the alternatives is instead of going all the way back, going back 10 years. So not
That just affects how much the bank can be.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
The process of the saving, whatever is gonna be discussed about what they'll be available for. One request was that the community have access to them. You haven't mentioned anything special about ADUs other than there being more work to implement, but I think the idea that there's somebody in need is good too. They maybe deserve something today, but anyway. I don't know if that's baked in the plans today or not.
No, this is exclusively looking at affordable housing, as I mentioned, if we don't get to a resolution by 2026. That triggers 11.6 of the housing element where we have to then go to course of initiative. All these other aspects of adding things that are new will require far more research, and we don't believe that we have adequate amount of time to be able to do all of that before the end of 2026. I mean, that's is something that certainly going forward, like in the next housing element, can be considered.
Not cast in stone.
Yeah, it's not cast in stone. It is something that if it is something that generally the community, we've all learned from this issue. Half Moon Bay is considering something like that, if I understand correctly. So yeah, that is an option that we can look at, but at this point, our goal is to not hit the gap in 2026.
Yes, thank you,
So I want to say to everybody, I've been in enough of these meetings, I'm feeling the unrest a little bit, it's starting to break up a little bit. I don't want people to leave. So if you have a question that's really important, please ask it, but I'd like to make sure we get to the part where people get to vote, so people don't walk out of this room out of frustration and they haven't given us their input, because I really need everybody's input tonight.
So we've been asking a lot of people in the room, there's one hand that's been up. If I may ask them, and then we can get back to the room. Please, could you allow me?
Hi, I have two questions. I think a lot of us came because we are concerned about evacuations. I'm curious to know who makes that decision ultimately. Is it CAL FIRE, the Coastal Commission, the Planning Commission? Who makes the decision that says, yes, the evacuation is adequate and nobody's going to get hurt? Because when I do see coastal residents dying from these fires, it doesn't seem like anyone is responsible. So I think on the front end, if we knew who is responsible, we could write them or talk to them about that the balance between development and safety. And my other question is about affordable units. My understanding is if you build a couple of, say, I don't know, 4 affordable units and 8 full price ones, do all of those units then get priority or are they counted differently? Thank you.
Well, a question about who's responsible for evacuations, I will have somebody else answer that, that's not part of it.
I can, I know. So at the time the building permits are issued, 5 different fire districts will go ahead and look at the ingress and egress from that area, and they go ahead and the fire marshal has to sign off on whether or not it's adequate. And so you may have noticed recently that there have been some road modifications that have gone in front of the board of supervisors. That was so that there would be fire marshal sign off with respect to Cypress. One of the things though that the fire marshal asked for was actually to get rid of parking in a lot of the streets around that, and we negotiated that away because we don't want to take away parking on people's streets. So there is a fair amount of give and take in that. But as I said, we understand that there's been for decades, there's been a problem on this coast side with respect to evacuation. And I'm gonna probably have a meeting with all of you again in the next 6 months to identify a site where we can go ahead and do shelter in place.
So getting back to your second question, that if you have a project that has market rate housing and affordable housing, they would be counted differently. Again, if both of those types of housing do not hit the cap, nothing matters. But if they do hit the cap, those affordable housing units could be either move forward in the present scenario, or if we choose a backward looking one, we would go backward. But we would have to hit the cap first.
Hi. Question, so
Oh, sorry.
going to F on the banking, option F,
So is that something that gets applied on a normal basis moving forward?
Yes.
It will,
Yes.
because that keeps everything within the guideline, keeps everything within cap, infrastructure, traffic impact, everything stays within cap. If we choose a 10-year cap.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for coming tonight. Dan Haverty, I've been on 37 years here at the coast side, spent 13 years on the Midcoast Community Council. My question, so the engine driving, all of this is trouble is the, state housing department rating numbers. Now, a lot of people don't know that the rating numbers provided by the state housing department was challenged by the state finance department, and they failed the audit of their calculations. So these numbers should be questioned, yet they've been ignored, and they are falling into these problems, which are hitting neighbors against neighbors, friends against friends within the community. Why has the county and the planning department not gone ahead and challenged these rain numbers, which are essentially causing all the problems?
So, you guys, got your cell phones, if you wanna go ahead and look up Sunset Magazine, Menlo Park. Look up the side, affordable housing development, 5280. Jurisdictions that decided they were gonna go ahead and try to challenge or play out the game legally. Developers came in and put in massive builders remedy projects to bank the space, leading to further litigation. And so some jurisdictions tried it, it failed. Some jurisdictions went to court, and I haven't heard of any jurisdiction being successful in this. And what I have heard of is the governor of the HCB actually suing jurisdictions and it being much worse for them. So.
But the law says the rating numbers should be developed between the housing department and the state finance department together.
If you,
I want to put it.
anyway, we're gonna go ahead and move on. That's common. Who's next?
Hello, my name is Chris Johnson. I was on the MCC for 7 years. I was also on the coast side design review committee for 10 years. I've been on a community representative, so I'm quite familiar with the process and the LCP. We're coming here today with my list of grievances that's several pages long. They're all out the window as I'm trying to decide between 5 different choices that all seem to have a poison pill or some disqualifying thing that doesn't seem to satisfy. So Supervisor Mueller, I'm putting you on the spot because I believe in you. I believe that you feel for the coast side. I know, Ray, but you know the coastal commission and the inner workings of the planning department better than anybody here. Which of these plans do you recommend for the coast side? That you think is best for the coast side?
Thanks.
I'm sorry. I cannot understand all these plans with all the hitting poison pill.
All right, so I would tell you honestly, before today, I was not excited about this plan. But today, after learning about policy 1.6 that triggers the cap to go up to 60, I want to stay away from that. Because I know HCD was seriously, I know how bad the state wants to raise the cap and get away from Florida's, any chance they get to raise that cap, they're going to for the long term. So I'm looking for the plan that keeps me away from that cap. The plan that keeps me away from that one is one of the last two, because it quickly brings us back to normal. And I'm trying to get that back to normal as fast as possible, because I know if I'm back to normal, I'm at that development at around that 36 unit, and I'm probably not gonna hit this cap based on historicals. So the only question in my mind that I haven't resolved yet, we can go either way, is whether or not I go a whole 10 years back, or I go all the way back. More than likely, I go, for me personally, I'm a little more conservative, so I go 10 years back.
I'm sitting down, but I'm a director at MSD and, you know, we were the ones that had the approved Cypress Point sewer permit. So it kind of came up at our meeting. Anyway, my question is, first of all, a lot of the sanitary districts and water districts are gonna lose permit fees if we don't lift the cap, and the county's gonna lose their permit fees. We're gonna lose our, Midcoast Parks mitigation fees if we don't lift the cap. And Nicholas, gave me his, information today. I think it's gonna be, the last couple of years, we got $139,000 in just Midcoast Park mitigation fees from permits. So it, you know, there's a lot to lose if we don't lift it. But I'm in favor of going back to 2016 because that's when Montero Water Sanitary District started giving out water permits again after 30 years of water moratorium. And that's when the tunnel finally opened. So that's when there was a little bit of growth. And it started growing from there, as you can see from, we put the chart down, anyway, that's when they started, the coast side started growing. But my question is, I went to the Big Wave ribbon cutting this weekend. And, they have residential there, but did they use up some of the water unit cap?
No, they're not standard residential units, so they didn't count.
Okay, and so if we do use the look back and, you know, what is gonna stop another affordable housing developer coming in and taking some of it? Anything? Nothing, you said, right?
Well, I mean, there's the fact that these projects are having a long incubation time, if you will. So, I mean, as you know, Cypress Point was about 10 years in the making. There's nothing specific on the table right now, so we're not anticipating.
Big Wave said it took them 27 years, so, but the other thing is, I know a lot of people talk about senior housing. I know a lot of us on the coast that lived here a long time and would like senior housing on the Midcoast. Because everybody's building out ADUs for their grannies now, but, that would be a great thing, that's something, but, I'm in favor of the 2016 thing, the look back.
And I'll say, all right, so I'm gonna use you going a long time. I've seen your candidate, but I really wanna let people vote, because I'm looking around the room, I got a lot of empty seats. So, I'll take, I know your hand is raised, you've been a long time, so I have one more question, and I'd like to go to the people.
Okay, just a little.
Yeah.
Say that he raised my family here, great place to live. Built houses up and down the county, city, half the way and so forth. People like me, people doesn't matter. Okay, I live in one neighborhood at a time. Some people see them. I'm not here to resist growth, resist density. I'm here to actually let people enjoy a home that they can live in. And we're not gonna live in a cave. So we have 40 units per year that's been allowed since 2013. So my question is, where's the problem if you bring the units forward that haven't been used? Okay, so, and so the question to the gentleman in the middle right there, how many have not been used since 2014? What's the number?
166.
166, okay, good. Okay. In the wording, when they imposed the 40 units per year, was there anything there that said that they could not be carried over to the future? Was there anything instituted in that 40 units per year?
No,
Okay, so why can't it be carried forward?
because it says explicitly that you cannot exceed the cap unless you have an affordable housing project that exceeds it. And you can only average going forward. There was no talk about looking back or banking or anything. It doesn't explicitly bans it, it doesn't explicitly allow it. So what we are doing is trying to look back as a way to get out of this situation.
So are you telling me in 2013 that you had affordable housing in mind, and this was part of the deal? And hold on, I'll finish with this one. Okay, so the urban boundary, all right, that's a certain area down the entire hillside. 40 units in the urban boundary. So outside of the urban boundary, none of these numbers count. Am I correct in saying so?
That is correct. There is a quote in the southern coast, but it's different, and we're not up against the limit.
Those are parts of Montero and other areas too on the coastline.
Correct. This is just within the urban services line, and the designated mid-coast urban area. And, so I was involved back in the 2013 LCP amendment, and when the coastal commission pushed for a complete moratorium, you know, we negotiated the 40, and I raised the concern that this could really impede our ability to build an affordable housing project if one were to come up. And that is what happened eventually. At that point in 2013, the coastal commission agreed to allow us to go over the 40 only for affordable housing projects. And that policy that was negotiated in 2013 does not allow us to look back for unused credits. That is what we're proposing today.
And one last thing. Builders remedy, what if that comes up and you guys don't meet your bonus?
So right now, we are conditionally certified, so the builder's remedy is not the viable option in the unincorporated area.
Thank you.
Last question, then we gotta move the vote.
ADUs seem to be a substantial component of the offset and getting through to this 40. State law and it's, was it, has moral exemption of ADUs from local to I hate to, I think, I've got, number of engagements with, enforcement on with a state and still, and they've, expressed their frustration to the, coastal communities that hearken to the local coastal, growth control measure as being a rationale that is purported to be the reason for why ADUs are counted when the state legislature is extremely explicit. It says, shall not be considered, ADU shall not be considered in growth control measures. And as I understand it from them, it hangs upon two particular aspects. One being that it's not local when in the very time of his local coastal policy. Second, that it is subject to coastal commission approval. It turns out that it is not subject to local coastal commission, but is subject to certification. Certification and approval are two very markedly distinct things. So I'm wondering to what extent has staff gone forward with attempting to actually utilize what is already enabled under state law, exempting kind of what we already was from the official measure.
So, the distinction you're making is certification means the coastal commission needs to approve the change in our local coastal program. So we are not proposing right now to approach the coastal commission and ask them to remove the ADUs from the cap. We're rather asking their permission to make use of unused credits from buyers. Those unused credits could be allowed, could be used to permit ADUs, but it would still be limited to 40 per year. Yeah, so the question is, why aren't we also asking the commission to just take ADUs out from the capital towards the cap, which is what state HCP is pushing for. Because we're trying to take a balanced approach here that gets us out from under the current challenge, but to the best of our ability, kind of retains the approach that we've been using over the past 13 years. So if we were to completely exempt ADUs, that would likely create a significant bump in growth. And we're trying to keep things pretty much as it were before Sacramento got it out.
And if I may just add, we have not exceeded the cap with ADUs until 2025. So traditionally, we have not seen an immediate need to reconsider ADUs out of the cap because we're not getting that. All right, so
All right, so I hate to cut off the questions, and we do appreciate it. People are starting to leave, and it's really important tonight that we have an opportunity to capture through the survey, your preferences. So what I would ask is, if you open up the camera on your phone, don't take a picture of this, but just point your camera at it, a little yellow bar is gonna come up on your screen. Go ahead and tap that. That will have a survey on it. If you go ahead and fill out the survey, it's a 1-question survey. And it just asks you which of these options you prefer. Once you go ahead and register that, we'll be able to accumulate all that information. And then determine what the next steps will be. If you do wanna, thank you all for being here tonight and take the survey. We will also be here. If you have any questions, please feel free to come find us. And we're happy to answer your questions. So thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Recording stopped.
Share with them.